In the heart of Lancaster County, where rolling farmlands and quiet towns painted an idyllic picture, there lurked an unsettling legend that whispered through the corridors of old farmhouses and rustled the leaves of ancient forests. The legend spoke of a being, as enigmatic as it was terrifying, known as the Slenderman. A tall, unnaturally thin figure with a featureless face, it was said to be clothed in a dark suit, blending the unnatural with the mundane. In this county, where traditions and tales were passed down through generations, the Slenderman was more than just a ghost story. It was a living nightmare that haunted the youth of Lancaster and its surrounding areas. The first inkling of something amiss came subtly. In the small town of Strasbourg, known for its well-preserved railroad and historic charm, people began noticing oddities. Children spoke in hushed tones of a tall figure watching them from the edges of the cornfields. These accounts were initially dismissed as overactive imaginations fueled by the ghost stories prevalent in the region. However, as autumn set in, bringing with it the rustling of golden leaves and a chill that seeped into the bones, the tales became harder to ignore. More and more sightings of the Slenderman were reported, always at a distance, always fleeting, but unmistakably sinister. The figure seemed to be drawn to the youth, appearing near schools, playgrounds, and places where children congregated. The first disappearance sent a wave of fear through Lancaster City. A teenager, well-liked and without any reason to run away, vanished after a night out with friends. His last message to his family was a cryptic text: "He's watching me." Search parties combed the nearby woods, but no trace of the boy was found. It was as if he had been erased from existence. Whispers of the Slenderman grew louder, no longer just a story to scare children but a genuine cause for concern. Parents kept a tighter leash on their kids, and curfews were strictly enforced. The local police, skeptical but disturbed by the unexplainable disappearances, began to delve into the history of this spectral figure. The legend of the Slenderman, they discovered, was not native to Lancaster County but seemed to have found a fertile ground for its horrifying roots to take hold. Descriptions of the entity varied, but a constant remained: its obsession with children and its ability to instill an almost paralyzing fear in those who saw it. As Halloween approached, the tension in Lancaster County reached its peak. Decorations of ghosts and goblins adorned the houses, but the real fear lay in something far less tangible. The Slenderman, once a distant legend, had woven itself into the very fabric of the community's fears and anxieties. On a particularly foggy October night, a group of teenagers dared each other to venture into the woods bordering Lancaster City. Armed with flashlights and a mix of bravado and fear, they stepped into the dense thicket, unaware that their actions would unravel more of the Slenderman's haunting presence. In the darkness of the woods, where the trees seemed to absorb both light and sound, they felt the weight of unseen eyes upon them. Every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves sent shivers down their spines. And then, amidst the shroud of mist and shadows, they saw it, a figure, impossibly tall and thin, its arms unnaturally long, standing just at the edge of their flashlight's reach. Panic ensued as the teenagers scrambled to escape, the haunting image of the Slenderman etched into their minds. They emerged from the woods breathless and terrified, their story adding another layer to the growing legend. In the days that followed, sightings of the Slenderman increased. It was seen lurking near an old, abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of town, standing motionless in the fading light of dusk. It appeared on the lonely roads that snaked through the county, its presence causing drivers to swerve in fear. The Slenderman had become more than a specter, it was a palpable force that brought a tangible sense of dread to the residents of Lancaster County. Yet, despite the fear, there was a fascination. People began to delve deeper into the legend, trying to understand the origin of this entity that had so seamlessly infiltrated their lives. What they found was a tapestry of stories and theories. Some believed the Slenderman was an ancient spirit, a manifestation of the county's collective fears. Others thought it was a more recent phenomenon, a creature born from the digital age's ability to spread and morph tales at an unprecedented speed. But no matter the origin, the Slenderman was now a part of Lancaster County, a shadow that loomed over its picturesque landscape. As winter approached, bringing with it shorter days and longer nights, the encounters with the Slenderman became more frequent and more disturbing. It was no longer just a figure seen from a distance. Now, it was an entity that left tangible traces of its presence. Objects would be moved, footprints found in unlikely places, and an oppressive feeling of being watched pervaded the towns and countryside. The disappearances continued, each one more baffling than the last. The victims were always youths, and they always vanished without a trace. The police, once skeptical, now faced a reality they couldn't explain with logic or reason. The Slenderman, a creature of myth, had become a very real part of their investigation. As the story of the Slenderman in Lancaster County unfolded, it became clear that this was not just a tale of a cryptid or a creature of folklore. It was a reflection of the fears and anxieties that lay beneath the surface of this seemingly tranquil county. The Slenderman, with its featureless face and enigmatic nature, was a canvas onto which the community projected its deepest fears. The legend continued to evolve, each encounter adding to the tapestry of tales that made up the Slenderman's presence in Lancaster County. And as the legend grew, so did the realization that some mysteries are better left unsolved, some fears better left unspoken. For in the heart of Lancaster County, where tradition and modernity intertwined, the Slenderman had found a home, a place where legend and reality blurred into a haunting narrative that would be told for generations to come. As the winter months blanketed Lancaster County in snow, the tales of the Slenderman grew increasingly grim. The once whispered stories now echoed loudly through the towns and villages, each account more chilling than the last. The creature, it seemed, was no longer content to simply lurk in the shadows, its actions became more brazen, more terrifying. In a small, tight-knit community near the Susquehanna River, the night was pierced by a blood-curdling scream. A young girl, no more than 12, had been playing in her backyard when she saw it, the Slenderman, standing at the edge of the woods. Its elongated arms reached towards her, and at that moment, she felt an icy chill grip her heart. She ran inside, screaming for her parents, who saw nothing when they looked out the window. But the snow bore the undeniable proof, a set of long, narrow footprints leading into the forest, stopping abruptly at the edge of the yard. In the heart of Lancaster City, a group of high school students reported a harrowing encounter. They had been exploring an old, supposedly haunted mansion on the outskirts of town when they felt an oppressive presence envelop them. The air grew cold, and a sense of dread filled the decaying rooms. Then they saw it, peering at them from the end of a long, dark hallway. Its suit seemed to blend into the shadows, its face an empty void. The students fled in terror, swearing never to return. The Slenderman's reach extended beyond the physical realm. Residents began to report disturbing dreams, where they were chased through endless fields of corn by the tall, faceless figure. These dreams were so vivid, so intense, that they left people waking in a cold sweat, unable to shake the feeling of impending doom. The local media, once hesitant to give credence to such tales, began to report on the phenomenon. Articles and news segments detailed the encounters, interviewing those who had seen the Slenderman and experts who offered theories ranging from mass hysteria to the presence of an unknown entity. The legend of the Slenderman was no longer confined to the whispers of children and the tales of the old. It had become a very real concern for the entire county. As the incidents accumulated, a group of local historians and folklore enthusiasts decided to delve deeper into the origins of the Slenderman legend in Lancaster County. They scoured old newspapers and historical records, and interviewed the eldest residents, searching for any clue that might shed light on the entity's origins. What they found was a tapestry of folklore and history that intertwined in unexpected ways. The Slenderman, they discovered, bore similarities to old Pennsylvania Dutch tales of the Nachtmar, a nightmarish entity that haunted sleepers. There were also echoes of Native American legends of tall, shadowy figures that walked between worlds. The deeper they dug, the more they realized that the Slenderman was not just a recent addition to the county's folklore. It was a culmination of centuries of fear and superstition, a modern manifestation of ancient terrors. As the winter gave way to spring, the encounters with the Slenderman did not cease, but they did change. The entity began to appear less frequently, but when it did, it was more targeted and more personal. It seemed to be focusing on specific individuals, haunting them with relentless persistence. One young man, a skeptic who had openly dismissed the Slenderman as a fabrication, found himself the focus of such attention. He reported seeing the figure standing outside his window night after night, and his skepticism turned to obsession. He began to research, to document, to try to understand what this entity wanted from him. But the more he sought answers, the more elusive they became. The Slenderman had become a part of the fabric of Lancaster County, a shadow that loomed over the community. The stories continued to be told, each one adding to the legend, each one a reminder that some mysteries are beyond our understanding. And as the people of Lancaster County went about their lives, they did so with a heightened sense of awareness, a realization that the line between legend and reality was thinner than they had ever imagined. The Slenderman, a creature of myth and nightmare, had made its home among them, and its presence was felt in every unexplained movement in the shadows, in every unaccountable chill in the air, in every story told in hushed tones as the night deepened around them. Life in Lancaster County, once marked by its serene landscapes and a strong sense of community, began to change under the shadow of the Slenderman. The continuous disappearances of children and the relentless stream of eerie occurrences took a heavy toll on the residents. As the stories kept surfacing, a palpable sense of despair and helplessness settled over the towns and villages. Families, once bound to their ancestral homes and the rich history of the county, started to leave. The pain of losing children to an unseen, incomprehensible force, or the fear of such a fate, proved too much to bear. Houses that had stood for generations, echoing with the laughter and life of large families, now stood empty, their windows like hollow eyes watching over the increasingly deserted streets. The exodus wasn't immediate, it was a gradual erosion of the community. Initially, it was just a few families, those most directly affected by the disappearances or who had experienced the most terrifying encounters with the Slenderman. But as the legend grew, so did the number of for sale signs that sprouted like unwanted weeds in front yards across the county. In the schools, classrooms began to thin out. Teachers faced the difficult task of trying to provide a sense of normalcy amidst the growing fear. Conversations in the staff rooms were no longer about grades or school events but whispered discussions about which family was planning to move next and which child had suffered from Slenderman-related nightmares the night before. Local businesses, too, felt the impact. The streets of Lancaster City, once bustling with tourists and locals alike, saw a significant decline in foot traffic. Shops that had relied on the charm and history of the area to attract customers now found themselves struggling to stay afloat. The legend of the Slenderman, which had started as a whisper, had grown into a roar that drove people away. The community gatherings, a staple of life in Lancaster County, became somber affairs. Where there was once laughter and lively conversation, there was now a heavy silence, broken only by hushed discussions about the latest sightings or theories about the Slenderman. The sense of community, once the county's greatest strength, was now tinged with suspicion and fear. Churches, too, saw a change in their congregations. Pastors and religious leaders found themselves addressing not just matters of faith but also the palpable fear that gripped their flocks. They offered comfort, organized prayer vigils, and tried to provide answers where there were none. The churches became refugees, not just from the spiritual uncertainties of life but from the very real fear that lurked outside their doors. As families left, the stories of the Slenderman continued, each new account adding to the tapestry of terror that had enveloped the county. The media, once buzzing with the sensationalism of the story, began to report on the exodus with a tone of solemnity. Documentaries and investigative reports attempted to delve into the phenomenon, but the truth remained elusive, as slippery and shadowy as the Slenderman itself. In this atmosphere of fear and departure, there emerged a sense of loss, not just of individuals but of a way of life. Lancaster County, with its rich history and strong sense of identity, was losing its essence. The rolling hills and picturesque farms were now backdrops to a story of fear, a narrative that overshadowed the county's heritage. Those who chose to stay did so out of a deep connection to the land and their community, or because they simply had nowhere else to go. They faced each day with a resilience that was tinged with sadness, a determination to continue their lives in the face of an unknown and seemingly unstoppable force. The Slenderman, a legend that had seeped into the very soil of Lancaster County, remained an enigma. Some continued to seek answers, delving into folklore, reaching out to experts in the paranormal, and even attempting to communicate with the entity itself. But for most, the Slenderman remained a symbol of their deepest fears, a reminder of the fragility of life and the mysteries that lie beyond the realm of understanding. As the years passed, the legend of the Slenderman in Lancaster County became a bittersweet part of its history, a story told with a mix of fear, sadness, and an unspoken hope that one day the truth would be revealed. The county, marked by the memories of those who had left and the shadows of those who had disappeared, moved forward, forever changed by the presence of the Slenderman. As the seasons turned in Lancaster County, a new and even more disturbing pattern emerged. No longer were the disappearances confined to the youth. Adults began to go missing under similarly mysterious circumstances. The Slenderman, a sinister specter that had once preyed predominantly on the young, seemed to have broadened its haunting reach. The first few cases of missing adults were met with disbelief and denial. It was one thing for children, with their vivid imaginations and susceptibility to fear, to be the focus of the Slenderman legend, but quite another for grown men and women to fall victim to what many still hoped was just a myth. However, as more adults vanished, the chilling reality became impossible to ignore. Experienced farmers, known for their early morning routines, disappeared from their fields, leaving behind only their abandoned tractors and a sense of unease that hung heavy in the morning mist. Local shopkeepers, pillars of the community, went missing from their stores, their last moments captured on grainy CCTV footage that showed them staring in terror at something just off camera. The impact on the community was profound and immediate. The already dwindling population of Lancaster County dwindled further as more families, now fearing for the safety of not just their children but themselves, packed up and left. The departures were no longer just whispered about in hushed tones, they were open discussions, as people shared their plans to seek a new life away from the shadow of the Slenderman. Law enforcement stretched thin and, facing a mystery that defied rational explanation, struggled to provide answers. Search parties combing the dense forests and sweeping the fields often returned empty-handed, save for the growing sense of dread that what they were dealing with was beyond their understanding. In this climate of fear, rumors and theories proliferated. Some speculated that the Slenderman was evolving, its powers growing stronger as the legend spread. Others wondered if the entity had always targeted adults, but these cases had simply gone unnoticed amidst the focus on the children. Some believed that the Slenderman was not acting alone, that perhaps there was more than one entity, or that it was part of a larger, unseen force that was influencing the county. The media coverage, once a frenzy of sensationalism, took on a more somber and speculative tone. Journalists and investigators from outside the county descended on the area, drawn by the deepening mystery and the growing list of unanswered questions. Documentaries and news segments attempted to piece together the story, interviewing locals, experts in folklore, and psychologists to understand the phenomenon. Amidst this turmoil, a small group of locals, including some who had lost loved ones to the Slenderman, formed a coalition. They sought to take action, to protect their community, and perhaps to find some answers. They organized night watches, set up cameras, and even attempted to communicate with the entity, all in the hopes of stopping the disappearances or at least understanding them. Their efforts, however brave, seemed to have little impact on the Slenderman's haunting presence. The entity remained elusive, its motives as inscrutable as ever. The night watches often ended with members of the group feeling watched and pursued. The cameras captured nothing but the play of shadows, and attempts at communication were met with silence or, more disturbingly, with responses that were as cryptic as they were chilling. As Lancaster County grappled with this new reality, the stories of the Slenderman took on a more desperate tone. No longer were they just tales to scare children or to be whispered about around campfires. They were now accounts of real loss, real fear, and a real search for answers. The legend of the Slenderman, once a curious and eerie part of local folklore, had transformed into a living nightmare, a pervasive and insidious presence that touched every aspect of life in Lancaster County. The once thriving community, now fractured and shadowed by fear, continued to search for understanding and peace, hoping against hope that the nightmare would one day end, and the mystery of the Slenderman would be unraveled. The encounter between the orphan and the Slenderman, a beacon of defiance amid despair, became but a footnote in the larger, more harrowing narrative that continued to unfold in Lancaster County. As the legend of the Slenderman grew ever darker, a new, chilling development emerged that seemed to underscore the sheer depth of the horror that the county faced. In the days following the boys' brave journey through the woods, locals and search parties venturing near the forest's edge began to notice something unsettling. Scattered throughout the underbrush, clinging to the bark of trees, and fluttering gently in the wind were pages torn from a notebook. Each page was a piece of a larger, more disturbing puzzle, bearing messages of fear, snippets of encounters with the Slenderman, and, most heartbreakingly, the last thoughts of some of those who had gone missing. These pages, found in the very woods that had become synonymous with terror, painted a vivid picture of horror and clairvoyance. The handwriting varied from page to page, some scribbles frantic, others eerily calm, but all conveyed a sense of imminent doom. The messages spoke of being watched, of an inescapable presence that stalked them through the trees. Some contained apologies to loved ones, while others offered warnings to those who might find them. The discovery of these pages sent shockwaves through the community. For some, they were a grim confirmation of their worst fears. For others, they represented a macabre clue in the ongoing mystery of the Slenderman. Volunteers and law enforcement redoubled their efforts to search the woods, each new page found adding to the urgency of their mission. Amidst this grim scavenger hunt, a group of determined locals began to piece together the notes, hoping to find some pattern or message that could lead to answers. They set up a makeshift command center in a community hall, walls lined with maps of the forest and strings connecting the locations where pages had been found. Night after night, they worked tirelessly, fueled by a mix of desperation and determination. Yet, as more pages were discovered, the mystery only deepened. Some pages seemed to suggest that the Slenderman was not just a predator but perhaps also a guardian of some ancient secret buried within the woods. Others hinted at rituals and pacts, the details of which were maddeningly vague. The woods themselves began to take on a sinister reputation beyond the presence of the Slenderman. Some searchers reported feeling disoriented, losing time, or being overcome by an inexplicable sense of dread that forced them to flee. Cameras and recording equipment malfunctioned, and compasses spun wildly as if the very land rejected human intrusion. As the collection of pages grew, so did the legend. The woods of Lancaster County, once a place of natural beauty and tranquility, had become a labyrinth of fear, a place where reality seemed to warp and bend. The pages, with their fragmented tales of despair and terror, served as a haunting reminder of the cost of curiosity and the price of venturing too close to the unknown. In the end, the pages became a part of the lore of Lancaster County, a physical manifestation of the Slenderman's terror. They were studied by researchers, discussed in hushed tones by locals, and even attracted the attention of outsiders drawn by the mystery. But for those who had lost friends and family, the pages were a somber memorial, a reminder of the loved ones who had walked into the woods and never returned. The tale of the Slenderman, with its notebook pages scattered like breadcrumbs through the forest, continued to evolve. A story was written not just by the entity itself but by all those who had encountered it. In Lancaster County, where reality seemed to bend in the presence of the Slenderman, the pages were a testament to the enduring power of stories, even those that end in silence. The community, already reeling from the fear and loss inflicted by the Slenderman, found this development both horrifying and mystifying. Search parties venturing into the woods in hopes of finding the missing or uncovering answers were instead met with these chilling tokens of the Slenderman's presence. Each page seemed to tell a story, a fragment of a life cut short or a mind driven to the brink by terror. Some contained desperate messages, pleas for help or forgiveness, while others were filled with drawings that depicted the Slenderman in various forms, each iteration more unsettling than the last. And with each new disappearance, whether it was a child who had wandered too close to the woods or an adult who had gone in search of answers, another page would appear, adding to the eerie tapestry that now adorned the forest. The authorities, overwhelmed and outmatched by the supernatural nature of the crisis, were at a loss. The pages became a focal point of their investigation, collected and analyzed in the vain hope of finding a pattern or clue that might lead to the Slenderman's undoing. But the pages offered no answers, only more questions. As the phenomenon grew, so did the legend. The notebook pages became a subject of morbid fascination for some, drawing thrill seekers and amateur investigators from beyond Lancaster County. These individuals roamed the woods, cameras and notepads in hand, eager to catch a glimpse of the Slenderman or to discover a new page. Few considered the danger, the very real threat that they too might become a part of the story they sought to unravel. Among the local population, the scattering of pages instilled a deeper level of dread. The woods, once a place of recreation and livelihood, were now avoided at all costs. Parents warned their children not to stray near the forest's edge, and tales of the Slenderman were no longer just stories to frighten but cautionary tales with deadly serious undertones. In this climate of fear, a few brave souls sought to understand the connection between the Slenderman and the notebook pages. They speculated that the pages were not just markers of the Slenderman's victims but perhaps a means of communication or a way for the entity to manifest its power. Some even believed that the pages held the key to stopping the Slenderman, that within the scattered notes and drawings lay a solution to the nightmare that had gripped Lancaster County. Yet, despite these theories and the efforts to decode the messages left in the woods, the disappearances continued. Each new page served as a grim reminder of the Slenderman's reach and the community's helplessness in the face of such an adversary. The tale of the orphan boy, who had faced the Slenderman with courage and emerged unscathed, became a beacon of hope amidst the darkness. Yet, it also underscored the enigmatic nature of the Slenderman, a being that defied understanding and whose motives remained as obscured as the featureless visage it presented to its victims. As Lancaster County struggled under the weight of this unfolding horror, the woods and the notebook pages within became symbols of a terror that transcended the Slenderman legend. They were reminders of the thin veil between reality and nightmare, and of the profound impact that fear could have on a community, a landscape, and the human psyche. As the community grappled with the increasing number of disappearances, the discovery of a new page became a harbinger of loss. It was as though the Slenderman was leaving behind a trail, a breadcrumb path of sorrow and despair, leading the curious, the brave, and the desperate deeper into its domain. Then, amidst this landscape of fear, a new page was found. Unlike the others, which often contained fragmented thoughts or pleas for help, this one bore a clear and unsettling message: find the orphan. The message spread through the community like wildfire, igniting a mix of hope and dread. The boy, the lone orphan who had ventured into the woods and emerged unscathed, had become something of a legend himself. His encounter with the Slenderman, witnessed by none but whispered about by many, had marked him as unique, a key figure in the unfolding drama of Lancaster County. The call to find the orphan was interpreted in many ways. Some saw it as a sign that the boy held the secret to ending the Slenderman's reign of terror. Others feared it was a trap, a ploy by the entity to lure more victims into its grasp. And some believed the boy himself had become something other, a bridge between the world of the Slenderman and their own. Teams of volunteers, already formed to search for the missing, redoubled their efforts. The woods were combed with a new purpose, not just to find those who had been taken but to find the boy who might be the key to understanding the Slenderman. The boy, for his part, seemed to have vanished. No one knew where he lived or how to find him. He had become a ghost, a figure of myth who had walked into the heart of darkness and returned. But the message on the notebook page had stirred something in the community. It was a challenge, a clue, and perhaps a lifeline. The search for the boy became a mission, a collective effort that brought together the fractured remnants of Lancaster County. It was as if, in seeking the boy, they were seeking a way to reclaim their lives from the shadow of fear. The woods, once a place of beauty and solitude, had become a labyrinth of secrets and dangers. But now they were also a place of hope, a puzzle to be solved. Each notebook page, each clue, brought them closer to understanding the Slenderman, closer to finding the boy, and perhaps closer to finding a way to end the nightmare that had consumed their community. The tale of the Slenderman, the orphan, and the notebook pages wove together into a tapestry of fear, courage, and mystery. It was a story that transcended the boundaries of Lancaster County, capturing the imagination of all who heard it. At its heart was the belief that within the deepest darkness, there can be light, and that sometimes, the key to confronting our monsters lies not in running from them but in standing firm and seeking to understand them. As the search continued, the community held on to the hope that the orphan, with his unique connection to the Slenderman, could offer a way out of the darkness. And in this hope, they found the strength to face another day, to keep searching, and to believe in the possibility of an end to the terror that had taken so much from them. The enigmatic pages, once perceived as mere echoes of terror, began to weave together a narrative far more complex and deliberate than the people of Lancaster County had initially understood. Each new disappearance, as heart-wrenching as it was, brought with it another piece of the puzzle, another page from the orphan's notebook. These pages, scattered throughout the woods like leaves in the wind, were inscribed with messages that varied wildly in tone and content. Some were cryptic, filled with riddles and references to local lore. Others were direct, with clear instructions that pointed to specific locations or objects within the woods. As the community collected and compiled these pages, a pattern emerged. It became evident that these were not random scribblings or the disjointed thoughts of a child lost to madness. Instead, They were a meticulously laid trail, a set of instructions designed to lead the finder on a journey through the heart of the Slenderman's domain. The realization that these pages were guiding them to a specific destination sparked a renewed sense of urgency among the townsfolk. Groups of volunteers, armed with maps, flashlights, and a determination born of desperation, ventured into the forest, following the breadcrumb trail laid out by the orphan's hand. The journey was not easy. The instructions on the pages often led them through the densest parts of the woods, into ravines, and across streams that had previously been untouched by human presence. Each step forward was taken with a heavy heart, for the woods were no longer just a place of natural beauty but a realm shadowed by the presence of the Slenderman. But the people of Lancaster County were undeterred. The shared goal of uncovering the truth behind the disappearances, and the hope that the orphan's instructions might lead to a resolution, drove them forward. And finally, after days of exhaustive searching, the last page led them to a clearing deep within the woods, a place that felt untouched by time. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient gravestone, weathered and moss-covered, so old that the name inscribed upon it was barely legible. The grave, it seemed, was the terminus of the orphan's cryptic scavenger hunt, the final piece in a puzzle that had consumed the county for too long. The discovery of the grave site brought with it a wave of questions. Who was buried there, and what connection did they have to the Slenderman? Was this the source of the entity's power, or perhaps a key to its undoing? The pages had led them here, but for what purpose? As the community pondered these questions, a sense of solemnity settled over the clearing. Regardless of the answers, this place was undeniably significant. It was a connection to the past, to the origins of the Slenderman legend, and perhaps to the orphan himself. In the days that followed, the grave site became a focal point for the people of Lancaster County. Some came to pay their respects, laying flowers and tokens in a gesture of remembrance for all who had been lost. Others saw it as a place of research, a clue that might unlock the mystery of the Slenderman's presence in their lives. But all who visited the site felt a sense of closure, as if the discovery had marked the beginning of the end of the Slenderman's reign of terror. The pages, once thought to be mere remnants of tragedy, had led them to a deeper understanding of the forces at play in their community. The story of the orphan, the Slenderman, and the ancient grave wove itself into the fabric of Lancaster County's history, a tale of darkness, mystery, and ultimately, hope. In following the orphan's instructions, the people had not only uncovered a piece of their past but had also taken a step toward reclaiming their future from the shadows that had sought to consume it. The night, already thick with the weight of their discovery, took on a sinister turn. The cold chill that swept through the clearing was not just the bite of the evening air, it was a harbinger of something far more ominous. Shadows lengthened, and the forest seemed to close in around the edges of the clearing, a silent witness to the unfolding drama. It was then that the Slenderman made its presence known. Emerging from the depths of the woods, it stood at the boundary of light and darkness, a figure of nightmare brought to life. The entity, drawn to the site by the gathering and perhaps by the revelation of the grave, loomed over the assembled crowd, its intentions as unreadable as its featureless face. The discovery of the grave had been a moment of profound significance, a connection to the past that promised answers and perhaps an end to the terror that had plagued Lancaster County. but the appearance of the Slenderman in the wake of this discovery was a stark reminder that the nightmare was far from over. The entity, it seemed, was not yet ready to relinquish its grip on the community, and the revelation of the grave had perhaps only deepened the mystery. As the people in the clearing confronted the reality of the Slenderman's presence, their resolve was tested. Fear, panic, and a primal urge to flee battled with the determination to stand their ground, to protect one another, and to face the darkness that had haunted them for so long. The grave, now known to be that of Johnny Vanjik, the orphan whose mysterious legacy had led them to this moment, became a symbol of their struggle. Johnny's story, intertwined with the legend of the Slenderman, had guided them to this place, to a confrontation with the very heart of their fear. The night unfolded with a tense, eerie stillness as if the forest itself was holding its breath. The Slenderman, a specter of loss and despair, faced the gathered descendants of Lancaster County, a community united by tragedy but bound together by a shared hope for resolution and peace. In the shadow of the Slenderman, the people of Lancaster County found a strength they did not know they possessed. The discovery of Johnny Vanjik's grave, rather than being an end, was a new beginning. A call to face the darkness, to seek out the light, and to write the next chapter in the story of their community, a story of courage, resilience, and the unbreakable human spirit. The adults, who had once watched over their children with vigilant eyes, found themselves powerless, their fears made manifest before them. The Slenderman, a creature of shadow and despair, seemed to revel in their terror, its tendrils of darkness reaching out to ensnare them. During this chaos, a child, unnoticed by the entity, found a page lying on the ground. As the adults were consumed by shadows and pulled into the earth itself, the child looked from the page to the grave and back to the Slenderman. The drawing on the page depicted a scene of vile betrayal and murder, a man, overcome by evil, killing a child and burying him in the very spot they now stood. The revelation was stark and horrifying. The child buried beneath their feet, the boy known as Johnny Vanjik, had become the Slenderman. The realization hit the onlookers with the force of a thunderclap. The Slenderman, their tormentor, was not just a creature of folklore or a manifestation of collective fear. It was born of tragedy, a soul twisted by betrayal and a thirst for vengeance. Johnny Vanjik, a name that would now forever be etched in the memory of Lancaster County, was at the heart of this nightmare. As the Slenderman continued its assault, the child, armed with the knowledge from the page, approached the grave. There was a palpable shift in the air, a sense of impending confrontation. The Slenderman, sensing perhaps a challenge to its reign of terror, turned its attention to the child. But the child stood firm, holding the page aloft like a shield. At that moment, there was an unspoken acknowledgement between them, a recognition of the pain and anger that had given rise to the Slenderman's existence. The child, though young, carried the weight of understanding, of knowing what it meant to be lost, to be forgotten. The standoff, tense and charged with a mix of fear and defiance, seemed to stretch into eternity. Then, slowly, the shadows receded, and the earth settled. The Slenderman, its form shimmering in the moonlight, took a step back, its tendrils withdrawing into the darkness from whence they came. The people of Lancaster County, released from their imminent doom, watched in stunned silence as the Slenderman disappeared into the night. The adults who survived the night's harrowing events, their numbers diminished by the Slenderman's relentless assault, gathered around the grave of Johnny Vanjik in a solemn circle. Their eyes, wide with a mixture of relief, sorrow, and lingering fear, were fixed upon the grave where the final act of an ancient tragedy had played out. In the hands of a child, the one who had uncovered the truth behind the Slenderman's origins, a shovel had become an instrument of liberation. With determined, if somber, resolve, the child had dug into the earth, unearthing the remains of Johnny Vanjik. The bones, long buried and forgotten, were now exposed to the moonlight, their eternal rest disturbed in a desperate bid for closure. With the bones laid bare, the child had done what the adults could not. With each strike of the shovel, the bones were shattered, a symbolic act aimed at breaking the cycle of vengeance and sorrow that had given rise to the Slenderman. The act was one of defiance, a declaration that the past would no longer hold sway over the present. As the dust settled and the echo of the final blow faded into the night, a palpable sense of hope mingled with the cold air. The adults, witnesses to this cathartic moment, dared to believe that the nightmare that had gripped Lancaster County for so long might finally be at an end. The Slenderman, born from the unjust death of Johnny Vanjik, had been confronted with the very essence of its origins, its bones crushed, its legacy challenged by the courage of a child. As the dust settled and the cold chill of the night began to lift, those who remained gathered around the grave of Johnny Vanjik, their hearts heavy with a mix of sorrow, relief, and a newfound understanding. The shattered remains of what was once a boy betrayed and buried in haste lay exposed, the deed done by the hands of a child wielding a shovel with a resolve far beyond his years. It was a grim act, but one born of a desperate hope to end the cycle of terror that had gripped Lancaster County for too long. The adults, their eyes wide with a mix of horror and awe, turned to the child, seeking answers to a story that had haunted their lives. How had he known what needed to be done? In response, the child produced a page, the final piece of a puzzle that had tormented the community. The page, worn and creased, bore the truth of the Slenderman's origin, a tale of a young boy, Johnny Vanjik, murdered by a tall man, his life cut short in an act of unspeakable cruelty. In his quest for vengeance, Johnny's spirit had transformed, becoming the very embodiment of fear and retribution, the Slenderman. The revelation was met with silence, a solemn acknowledgement of the tragedy that had unfolded and the price paid in the pursuit of justice. The community, once paralyzed by fear, now found itself united in a shared grief for the boy who had lost his way, becoming the monster they feared. In the aftermath of that night, the people of Lancaster County took it upon themselves to ensure that the story of Johnny Vanjik, the lost child turned monster, would not be forgotten. The notebook pages, once scattered throughout the woods like leaves in the wind, were carefully collected and assembled into a book. This book, a testament to the pain, the fear, and ultimately the courage of their community, was placed on display at the local library. The book served not just as a memorial to Johnny Vanjik but as a cautionary tale. It was a reminder of the consequences of violence, of the pain that begets pain, and of the importance of understanding the darkness that can dwell within and without. The library, a beacon of knowledge and a cornerstone of the community, became a place of pilgrimage for those who sought to understand, remember, and teach future generations the lessons born from the legend of the Slenderman. As years passed, the tale of Johnny Vanjik and the Slenderman became an integral part of Lancaster County's history. Parents would speak of it in hushed tones, teachers would reference it in lessons on folklore and morality, and children would grow up with the understanding that monsters are not just born of shadows but of actions. The legend of the Slenderman, once a source of terror, had been transformed. In its place stood a story of redemption, of a community that faced its darkest fears and emerged stronger, united in the hope that by remembering the past, they could prevent such tragedies from ever occurring again. And so, the grave of Johnny Vanjik, once a symbol of fear, became a monument to resilience, a testament to the power of a community to